Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at Catholic Table Talk Podcast. This is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table. I'm alone again this week, but glad that you join me at the table for another great episode. Um, this is part one of a two-part series. We're gonna do it on the Crusaders. So, great show coming up by myself. We're going to take two parts this week, and we're going to do in two parts, and then we'll have another series coming up about the Spanish Inquisition and how that differs from the Crusaders. That's coming up in a few weeks, but for the next 2 weeks, it's the Crusaders and the myth of the Crusaders, parts 1 and 2. This is part 1, so again, thanks for joining me. But let's start off the show by saying thank you to all the support, whether on all platforms. I'm watching, listening, subscribing, all that stuff. Thank you very much. Please subscribe and hit the notification bar if you have not already, or if you're new, so you never miss a week's show or a week's update or whatever the case might be. Also, if you want to support a show, get a hold of me. There's also videos on Facebook and YouTube discussing how to support a show, but always email us at catholictt@gmail.com for sponsorship as well as show topic requests, speaker requests, that type of thing. Today's show is once again, of course, brought by How Old Is Your Church? The Introductory Guide to Catholic Apologetics by Ken Litchfield. So thank you, Ken, again for supporting this show. $5.99 on Amazon. Just look up Ken Litchfield's book on Amazon. $6 you can have in the mail in about about a week or so. So only 100 pages, really easy to read and all of that stuff. Again, that's catholictt@gmail.com for sponsorship and any other requests or feedback you have for the show. Okay, now let's get into this week's topic, which is still kind of heated in the world today. Now, like I've been saying, most of the time I've been on recording and presenting this podcast out there for all you is Catholic Table Talk is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table for discussion. That's what we want to do. Means we want to spread, share the Catholic faith, and defend it. So we want to spread, share, and defend the Catholic faith because, like my high school instructor, Gary Machuya, who's been on the show a few times, he always said, we're all Catholic apologists. It's just, what do we do with it? We're all called to be Catholic apologists. Like, we're all called to be saints. We're all called to be Catholic apologists. Maybe you have one person one day come up and ask you 10 questions about the Catholic faith. Maybe another day is 25 people. It doesn't have to be like a Jehovah's Witness knocking on your door when you have to get into Catholic apologist mode. No, it's every day we have to be in the Catholic mode. We're supposed to be living a holy life and then defending the faith like people who have come before us have. So we're all called to be Catholic apologists, and this is what we're going to talk about today is the myth about the Crusaders and how a lot of people kind of edit history, like blow up with, not facts about the Crusaders, just myths. So I'm going off most of this content is from Gary Machuya's class. So thanks, Gary. I've learned through that class a few years ago, back when I was in high school. It was off the book Bearing False Witness by Rodney Stark. Now, Rodney Stark is a Lutheran. He's a Protestant. He's not Catholic, but Lutherans are almost Catholic, and he gets, like Gary Machuya saying, he knows that the myths are myths. Like, he knows that there are facts. Like, the myths are myths, and there's, like, true facts about what actually happened. And he believes it. So, he's actually with the Catholics in this book. He's, like I said, he's a Protestant, but Rodney Stark, the best-selling author of The Rise of Christianity, debunking centuries of anti-Catholic history. So, You know, it must be true when a Lutheran, a Protestant, writes a book defending the Catholic faith. You know, there's something wrong with how people view the Crusaders today. So this part one, we'll do the first 6 myths. There's about 11, 12 of them. So we'll do the first 6. Next week we'll do 7 in the West. So myth number 1. Okay, myth number 1. Someone comes up to you and says, the Crusaders were acts of aggression. And this is at some common objections to them. Points to remember about the Crusaders. The rise of Islam took place in the 7th century. And the Fourth Crusade did not happen until 1096. So the 7th century didn't happen until like 400 years later. So that's acts of aggression. Why did they take out Islam in the 7th century? After AD 630, 2/3 of Christian lands were Muslim. By the Fourth Crusade, nearly 90% of Christian territory was occupied by the Muslims. Even after some 30,000 churches were born or pilgrimaged by the 8th century, there was no Christian repairs from the West. It wasn't until the rise of the Seljuk Turks, that the repairs against Christian pilgrims, as well as a request for help from the Byzantine Empire, that the First Crusade was called. So the Muslims took over. Christians didn't do anything about it until about 300 or 400 years later, until the Turks took over. Then there was a little bit, then they were on the Crusade. The purpose also of the Crusades were not the abolition of Islam, or the forced conversion of Muslims, or an effort to extort money or grab property. The main goal was to secure a safe travel for pilgrims to the Holy Land. When the Crusaders did win and form their Crusader kingdoms, Muslims were allowed to live, travel, and trade within those territories, generally with little restrictions. It's kind of like America. You can be all different kinds of religions. Just America is kind of under one. I mean, I believe it's mostly Catholic, but it's under kind of one. It's like Christianity. So you don't have to be Christian to live in America. You can practice your faith if you have faith or not. With little restrictions, you can live, travel, and trade within the country. So it's just like America. They weren't forced about They weren't forced to develop a Christian lifestyle. So myth number 2. That was myth number 1. Myth number 2. The Crusaders were a holy war against Muslims. The Crusaders made no attempt to impose Christianity on Muslims. Crusader kingdoms always contained far more Muslim residents than Christians, like we just mentioned. In the 13th century, some Franciscans initiated conversion efforts among Muslims, but these were based on peaceful persuasion and were quite unsuccessful and were soon abandoned. That is from Stark, page 100, from that book there. This is lots of pages on this myth. He continues. This is from Ibn Jubra, who lived from 1145 to 1217. He was a Muslim writing between the Second and the Third Crusades. Travels of Ibn Jubra, September 17th, 1184. We moved from Tuban, may God destroy it, at daybreak on Monday. On our way lay through continuous farms and ordered settlements, whose inhabitants were all Muslims, living comfortably with the Franks. God protect us from such temptation. They surrender half their crops to the Franks at harvest time, and pay as well as a poll tax of 1 dinar with a 5 quart for each person. Other than that, they are not interfered with, save for a light tax on the fruits of the trees. The houses and other effects are left to the full possession. Other coastal cities are occupied by the Franks and are managed in this fashion. The rural districts, the villages and the farms, belong to the Muslims. So that's a Muslim saying how well the Muslim lifestyle was when the Crusaders took over. Yeah, they gotta pay taxes, but like everyone else, they gotta pay taxes. Like trading, they kind of got along pretty good with the Franks. You know, but I mean, that's how the coastal cities were occupied by the Franks. But in the rural districts, the villages and farms and belonging to the Muslims. So they had other rural countries. So all the little towns, you just think of America, all the little towns, those were all run by the Muslims. So the Muslims had it pretty good. So the myth about the Crusaders were a holy war against the Muslims is a little incorrect. He continues, but their hearts have seceded, for they absorb how unlike them in ease and comfort as their brethren in the Muslim religions under the Muslim governors. This is one of the misfortunes affecting the Muslims. The Muslim community bewails the injustice of a landlord of its own faith, and applauds the conduct of its opponents and the enemy, the freakish landlord, and must turn to God. There is comfort and consolation enough for us in the exile book. It is nothing but a trial, though Marcus to err with it, whom thou present, and guidest whom thou pleasant. That's from their Bible, the Quran, 7155. So that is myth 2. So once again, Muslims are pretty dang good off. I mean, yeah, pretty good off. I don't think I had anything to say about that one, but same thing. I mean, they're basically, I mean, okay, let me just go back here. The Muslim community bewails the injustice of a landlord of his own faith, he said, and applauds the conduct of its opponents and enemy, the freakish landlord. I mean, yeah. So, for they observe how unlike them in ease and comfort are their brethren in the Muslim religions and under the Muslim governors. So, sounds like they're living pretty well, and I mean, so this is from the Muslim Bible, but Muslim book. Yeah, so definitely Muslims were in a good place back then. Maybe kind of lean more towards Christianity. They're by themselves almost, but they were definitely living a good life. Myth number 3: the Crusaders were motivated by greed. Had the Crusaders not been motivated by religion, but by land and looting instead, the Knights of Europe would have responded earlier. In 1063, when Pope Alexander II proposed a crusade to drive the infidel Muslims out of Spain, unlike the Holy Land, Moorish Spain was extremely wealthy, possessing an abundance of fertile lands, and was close at hand. But hardly anyone responded to the Pope's summons. So again, like we talked about in myth number 1, if they were about greed and everything, why didn't they attack right away? When Spain was nearby, and the Holy Land wasn't, why didn't they attack? But they didn't. Yet, only 20 years later, thousands of Crusaders set out for the dry and improvised wastes of foreign Palestine. What's the difference? Spain was not the Holy Land. Because, yeah, Spain was rich. They had money, they had nice lands. It's kind of like, let's just say, you like this one country, it's kind of run by this group, so you want, get the oil from that country. But you don't do it because it's not the Holy Land. So again, they only do it if it's the Holy Land. Myth number 4: the Crusaders were motivated to get rid of too many young nobles. The supposed surplus of sons couldn't possibly be a factor for the Crusades. It was so expensive that only the heads of upper class households could afford to go. You might hear, well, I don't like this politician, probably don't like that. Other rich people, they don't have the sons, daughters go to war. It's always the middle class, poor people. Well, the Crusaders, it was expensive. I mean, a lot of people, it was the upper class households could afford to go. And most of the Crusaders made no plans to remain in the East after the Crusade was done. They planned to return to the States. So basically, like World War II, most of them probably didn't want to stay over there, or didn't stay over there after the war. They went back home. It's the same thing. The Crusaders' own settlements revealed this is not the case. Most went out of penance for sins and out of charity for Christians who were being afflicted. So basically, it was a penance to go out and fight for the Crusades. If you had a very serious sin, mortal sin, or so very serious, or just something, you're a criminal, or something really you were really not. You had quite a few sins on you, or whatever. It was your penance. You had to go fight for the Crusades, and out of charity for other Christians who are being affected. So basically, same thing you hear the war in Ukraine. There's a lot of Christians over there. A lot of people are trying to help them out. It's the same thing. Myth 5. These last 3 myths, a couple myths are only 1 page long. So, the Crusaders were the first colonists. Colony is normally defined as a place that is partially directed and economically exploited by a homeland. Funding for the Crusades and the kingdoms came almost entirely from Europe. The Crusaders remained dependent on Christendom for men and money, endured as long as Christendom remained enough to keep supplying them, and weathered and collapsed when the interest was lost. There was spiritual profits, not material. So again, they didn't want to stay in the lands before the Holy Land. They didn't really want to stay in the Holy Land that much. They want to go back to their own homes, and they weren't really funded well. Like I said, that most of them were payments or out of charity, so most of them were volunteers or, and basically all came from Europe. So yeah, they weren't the first colonists. It was a very expensive crusade. Crusades are very expensive, just like a war is. War is very expensive, and their spiritual profit is not material. So, yeah, no, the Crusades were not the first colonists. Last myth for today, myth 6, is the Crusaders were also aimed at forcibly converting the Jews. Now, if you go through all that, and this person is still getting at you at this, there's only like 1 or 2 or 3 things. First, they weren't listening to you. Second, they are not getting something, which we all do at times. We all don't. It doesn't make sense until someone really, really explains it. We go through other motions. That is possible. Or 3, they just don't care and they just want to argue with you. So myth 6 is the Crusaders were also aimed at forcibly converting the Jews. Like we already given several reasons why this is a myth. Here's a few more. Catholic theology always held that faith is a gift from God. That's from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 through 9. Let me say that again. Catholic theology has always held that faith is a gift from God. No one is forced to become a Catholic. Where Jesus said, make the seed, plant the seeds, and I will make them grow. So you can plant the seeds with people, just giving them the facts, telling them why you're Catholic, what you do as a Catholic, this and that. But Jesus really takes over from there, and the Holy Spirit, if that person becomes a Catholic. It's not, you just need to plant the seeds. To force someone to have faith doesn't make sense. It's kind of like having someone force you how many kids you can have, who you can vote for, what you should think and not think, what you should say and not say. It's to force someone to have faith doesn't make sense, and it truly does. You're not being the holy Christian, saintly person that you should be if you do that. And last one is it was never the stated purpose of the crusade to force people. This didn't mean that conversion was welcome. It was. But it was not the Crusaders' purpose. Remember, the Crusaders' purpose was to keep the Holy Land safe, and the most importantly, though, a safe road to the Holy Land. Because Christians were being attacked by the Turks, and maybe a few Muslims, but it's like really when the Turks came in, when the Christian pilgrims were getting killed and looted and all that, robbed and everything. So they wanted a safe passage to the Holy Land. That is why the Crusaders went out. Like I said, everything like 1096. It was in the 7th century. It was in the 8th century. It was when things really, really, really got bad. Because who doesn't want to go to the Holy Land? I want to go to the Holy Land, but you want to make sure you have a safe passage to the Holy Land, and that's why the Crusades happened. So 6 down, like 5, 6 more to go. Thank you for bearing with me. Hopefully you learned something about the Crusaders. Like I said, really great stuff with Good Mature, that class. That's why I learned about it. I came across all the papers, and I'm like, hey, I remember doing this. I haven't made a show on it yet, so good time is any. So, but like I said, hopefully you learned something, and don't forget, like I said, to tell your friends and family what you learned. And like I said, I'm proud to be Catholic apologist every single day. I said, it might be the person you walk by on the street. It might be, you might listen to the radio station and the DJ is telling something about the bad about the Crusades, so you gotta call in and defend them. Whatever the case might be, keep the faith and have courage to do that. So God bless you, and God willing, we'll see you again next week for part 2 of this 2-part series. Like I said, we'll do the Inquisition after the Crusaders in a few weeks. But same time, same place, on Catholic Table Talk Podcast, where everything Catholic is on the table.